Hi guys, I'm Simon.
And I'm Matt.
And together we host a podcast called, Heist Podcast, where we talk about heists. We go into the world of heists and the people behind them, discussing heists in the news and the biggest, most famous heists from history.
Historical heists, epic heists, movie heists, all the heists.
You name it, whether it's stealing moon rocks, millions of dollars, or I think one time we even discussed meatballs being stolen from someone's garage. If you love to hear about the minds and the characters of the people who pull off these amazing heists, give us a listen. We're Heist Podcast.
Check us out on Heist!
This episode of Just the Tip-Sters is sponsored by Clean Spa Bath & Body. That's clean with a K. Cleanspa.com. Clean Spa. Prepare to smell delicious.
From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
This means war.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a cold case that's been neglected by the police, something you think you saw but you're not quite sure, how to get Cher to actually say farewell and mean it, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. Trouble is her middle name, and that's why the TSA always goes through her luggage, Melissa Morgan!
More cowbell. Yeah, the TSA and I are not friends.
You're not friends with anybody, really.
I think you and I both. You take a lot more trips than I do, and you come back and unpack your bag, and you're like, God damn it! Is there another piece of paper in there? They say, we went to your shit, fucker.
Well, they say it just like that.
That's
too.
how they would say it if they spoke.
They actually would. They sound kind of like Saddam Hussein on South Park. I've got a laptop that is just the
that's
front
right.
of it
My
is
God,
completely ripped off.
Two different incidents.
Yep.
They bashed the case, and then it was also then the screen.
No, screen's okay, but the whole front part of the shell is by the lower
case,
lower left hand corner is just it's off. It's broken off, cracked off.
Yep.
Yay!
But they did a second time, or no? You thought they did, but they didn't.
No, they did a second time. It made it worse. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, in fact, the first time was just cracked. The second time it came off, and so I had to I had to put some paper over it and then tape that, and it was just so it won't be exposed.
And your tax dollars paid for that.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Right.
We're
safe. We're safe though.
I feel very safe. I mean, I consistently smuggle drugs in my butthole to Kentucky, and no one ever knows that, but they've gone through my underwear more times than I can tell you.
You know they're listening.
I don't give a shit. I don't smuggle. Anyone who knows me knows nothing goes up the butthole.
This is true.
Things just come out. Jeez. God.
I just have to take your word for that. But
I know there's a tattoo.
Yeah.
There is a clearly written tattoo that explains nothing goes up it. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about that anymore.
You know what we ought to do is we ought to have a contest, and the winner of the contest will be able to get a photograph of that tattoo.
Here's the thing: no one would enter. No one wants a picture of my butt. So anyway, back to the TSA.
Yes.
I am a very boring human being, and I'm a fairly good packer. I've learned over the years to the rolling things, and I'm pretty good because bags are like 50 pounds. I get up to about the 47-pound mark, and I know I'm like, I'm not going to pay extra.
You're pretty magical about that.
I am good because I
really
pack a lot. I'm extraordinarily high maintenance, and I need a lot of options. I don't pack like one, black t-shirt and one pair of jeans. I need options.
Honey?
Yep.
You're a girl.
I am, as far as I remember.
So that's really, it's not that extraordinary. I think
No, but I think there are people who are, I come home not having worn 2/3 of what I packed, but I need options. So the thing that has bothered me the last few times I have traveled is that I get home and my bras are akimbo. And the last time I was really pissed because I take a shot load of supplements and vitamins and bullshittery, and I take a pill pill case thing with the dates, the Monday through Friday or Sunday through Monday thing or whatever.
Right, so you don't forget what to take on what day.
Exactly. And they had gone through my stuff, and all my supplements and vitamins were on the bottom of my bag. They had come out of every date, so I had to go back and read. I was really angry, and I know it's a very small thing, especially when you've had your computer broken, but I was still pissed off.
You're entitled to be pissed off about that. I think anybody would be.
And I was frisked one time to the point of crying. And, I'm a real thin-skinned, overly sensitive, mush ball anyway. But I don't know it wasn't my, platinum hip or whatever the hell. There was nothing metal on me, going through that electronic thing that should have made it go off, but something did. So they, pulled me aside, and I'm sure lots of people who travel have gone through this and probably in worse ways. And the dude said, do you want me to get a female? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So he got a female who proceeded to feel up the sides of my boobs and in between my legs. It was, and I felt, I had to keep my hands behind my head. It was like, I felt like a criminal, and I started to cry. I don't mean like, blubbering, but tears were rolling to my face. And the woman stopped and said, do you want me to get a female supervisor? And I go, and what good would that do? Please hurry up and get done. And they took me off to the side and did it again, while I then started crying harder. And I didn't, lodge a complaint or write anyone, because nobody gives a shit. But I can tell you, being felt up by a stranger, unless it's like one you really kind of dig, it's really off-putting and scary.
Well, it's a violation.
It was. Totally, I don't even want to use the word like trauma, but I felt traumatized for a while. It just was ridiculous.
Yeah, and it seems like they pulled you off to the side and did it again just because you started crying.
Yes, I think I pissed them off about their job, and then they wanted to piss me off or hurt me worse. So
this does not mean we are against the TSA or the job they have to perform.
I'm delighted that someone makes sure that I don't have, bombs in my shoes and my underwear or the sides of my bra. I'm really, and anyway, sure. It's a much bigger discussion for a different podcast, like bitching with Melissa or something, that we could start that podcast.
I'll get right into that.
So this episode was inspired by a discussion with Tip-Sters Bridget and Lee, and producer Mark and I had dinner with them. And Tipster Bridget has no idea how she influences me almost on a daily basis. And not just because she told us that we can order Mountain Dew Kickstart from Amazon. She's made our life much easier, for sure. But she has such a great brain, and she loves mysteries, and she loves solving them, and she loves the details of cases the same way I do. What makes someone do what they do. But I found we had this other thing in common too. Especially since hosting this podcast, which I have, been a true crime fan lover since I was probably 12, like preteen. And it all, started with the whole Helter Skelter thing. And
you want to remind the audience how you got involved with Helter Skelter?
The book, I got it at a very young age. We don't need to go over that.
Because your mom took you book shopping, and she thought you were going to get a nice little book about comedy or something.
Yeah, I was going to get the Anne of Green Gables, and I was like, no, I went this one. I think it was I think I purchased it myself, the paperback. It had, come out years before. But anyway, yeah, and actually producer Mark and I were discussing it today. There are certain images that are, burned into your brain. And one of them is the way they blacked out the outlines of the bodies in the pictures. There's a lot of black and white pictures in the book. And I simply, just remembered the way the bodies fell and being just horrified. I was way too young to be reading it, but, that's okay. It's maybe it's formed who I am. But one of the things I say sometimes in exasperation to producer Mark is that if someone comes at me, he should never worry about me because I'm so filled with anger and rage. I would just turn around and be like, I will kill you. Like if someone comes at me, they're going to be like, oh, I shouldn't have picked that one, which I don't think anyone would. I'm a big, scary old lady and nobody is going to fuck with me.
Well, you're not a big, scary old lady, but let's just hope that nobody
I don't
bothers
think,
you or
right.
me.
Yeah, exactly. And you have said that too. I've been afraid sometimes when you've gone out to do something by yourself in a not great area. And I'm like, I'm worried. And you're like, no one's going to come after me. I look scary. And I thought, oh yeah, he doesn't look like he is, which is a sweet, amazing, wonderful man. But he does look, you can, I think,
I can throw a look.
It harkens back to your love of acting, and as a youngster, wanting to be an actor. I think you can I think you could act your way out of anything. I think you'd act very different than you are, and someone would be scared. I really do.
Well, let's hope I never have to try.
Let's hope you never have to try. So as we were having dinner, I mentioned to Tipster Bridget that other than having someone like waiting for me in the backseat of my car, which is, one of those things a big nightmare, I just had the feeling I would turn around and go, come on. You want to go? The light is green. Let's go. So I'm going to hope there's nobody in my backseat of my car waiting for me ever. I do try and look before I get in, but my windows are kind of tinted. But Tipster Bridget said something that sparked this whole thing. So, August is going to be Survivor Month, and there are amazing stories. I realized that I had gotten a little down, a little melancholy, and don't think I don't love covering all stories, but I had gotten a little down, and these are the stories that they may not have all remarkably happy endings, but they actually do have some amazing outcomes. Not all easy, but survivor stories nonetheless. So August is going to be survivor stories, and we'll still have the last episode of the month will be an unsolved case. I don't know which case that's going to be. Actually, I do know which one that's going to be, but I'm not telling you. This story is one that Tipster Bridget started to tell, and I was like, oh yeah, I know. And she's like, you know? And I'm like, hi, have we met? I love this shit. And this was a pretty amazing story. And one of the things that I love about this genre is that you can name someone like John Smith, and someone will say, oh yeah, I know that story. And then you can say something like Charles Manson, and people will be like, I'm not familiar with him. I don't know. So sometimes small cases, although I wouldn't call this one small, people know maybe because they lived in the area or something about the case intrigued them. And then sometimes, large cases kind of either get buried or unseen by certain people. I still go back and forth in my head about why Israel Keys isn't more well known, because he's dead now at his own hand, thank God. But, awful and smart and awful, but a lot,
mostly awful.
Mostly awful.
Let's be honest.
But if you say Israel Keys, people will be like, oh, is that some part of the Middle East where there's fighting? I mean, a lot of people don't know who the fuck that is.
No, those are the keys off of Israel, right?
They are little islands off of, in the Dead Sea, and they float because they have salt there. So this case, and I don't want to even say it's Ramon Salcido. This is the story of Carmina Salcido. And I was surprised that Tipster Bridget was surprised that I knew the case, because it is so fascinating. But before we get into that, we would like to tell you that you can always call us with any sort of story idea or case you want us to cover at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. You can email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. We got a really awful review this week from someone who I don't know what I'm just going to call her Sandy Vagina, because something got, I hope she builds a pearl in there, because she has a sandy vagina. She is very irritated, and she left a really shitty review. So if you have, that is ridiculous, because she called me obnoxious, check, bratty, disrespectful, and childish. And I was like, nanny poo poo, I am not. So I mean.
No, yeah. See, fans, what I'm trying to do is convince your host that these idiots that
yeah, I know I shouldn't read
there
reviews.
are such things as constructive criticism.
There is, and I would listen.
Yeah, but not when you.
I'm not sure I'd take it, but I'd listen.
Not when you just hurl, horse manure
invectives that are like, it's like, what? That doesn't even make sense. I'll cop to obnoxious. I'm totally obnoxious, but disrespectful, childish, and bratty. I mean, not even on a bad day. I just, that's just it. I felt like she hadn't even listened to the podcast, but I
don't think she did.
Well, I don't know who she is or what she wants, but I don't care. But the ratings and reviews that we get on Apple Podcasts help other people find us, and we need some finding. We need more reviews and ratings, and we need people to know we're here in a good way. So if you have a moment, we would love for you to do that. We understand, we have a Patreon page, and we understand that it's not always available to your budget to contribute to the care and feeding of the podcast, but it costs you $0 to write a review if you have the time, or at least go and rate us 5 stars. Not 1 star, but 5 we would be very grateful.
We would. And by the way, that Patreon address, if you can participate, we've got some great stuff we're giving away, depending on what level you choose, but the address is patreon.com/justthetipsters.
Thank you, Producer Mark. And speaking of great stuff, oh my goodness, I fall more in love with products from Clean Spa every day. I am now madly in love. I've always loved Jennifer Hardaway's products with a vanilla tint. Sometimes it's like truly vanilla. It's vanilla sandalwood. I'm now madly in love with Sweet Smoke. So madly in love with that. I have the Sweet Smoke scrub. It's really closely behind any of her vanilla scented products. And we just want you to know that this episode is sponsored by Clean Spa Bath and Body by Jennifer Hardaway. And in addition to the cleanses and scrubs that make a perfect bath or shower, Clean Spa also offers candles to enhance your bath experience or in any room in your house. The candles diffuse their scent throughout the room and provide a therapeutic ambiance to calm and soothe as you bathe or even just walk around your home. Clean Spa candles are made with 100% soy wax and are available in 18 pre-made scents. Or you can design your own by mixing and matching any of the dozens of fragrances that Clean Spa offers. Make sure to enter the promo code Tip-Sters at the checkout to get your 15% off of your total order. Remember, that's Clean Spa with a K, cleanspa.com. Clean Spa, prepare to smell delicious. And I'm telling you, the Sweet Smoke is really quickly becoming my new favorite. It's really spectacular. And there's something about Jennifer's creative, inventive mind that she's always coming up with combinations you wouldn't think, like leather and tobacco. And you're like, well, that sounds like a shitty bar. And it smells like heaven or a handsome man's neck. It's
Whose handsome man are you thinking of?
You.
Oh, okay.
It's I know you don't smoke, but the Sweet Smoke is just like, I want to eat my own fingers after I take a shower. I just love it with all my heart. So back to having dinner with Tipster Bridget and Tipster Lee and Producer Mark, and me saying that I would go apeshit on someone who came at me because I'm just so filled with anger. Tipster Bridget started to tell the story, and this is what's so amazing, is that this awful story inspired her to think of how to take care of herself if something were to happen. And it was I don't know if it was the sheer will to live of this little girl, if it was luck. I think there are many, many things at play here that helped Carmina Salcido survive. But Tipster Bridget said she's got plans if anything were to happen to her. And nobody thinks about these things, except all of us do really at some point. And I love that Tipster Bridget thinks about them and is open to talk about them. She remembered this story from 1989, and she said that if anyone were to ever cut her throat, she would let her chin fall forward onto her chest and compress the wound. And I thought, well, that's really smart. And then I was like, well, I know where that came from. And then she started to tell the story, and I said, oh, yeah, of course I know that story. So I don't know that as a 3-year-old, Carmina Salcido had the wherewithal to know that keeping her head forward would save her. Of the 8 people her father tried to kill that day, and 7 of them he did kill. But it did save her. And she was sitting up and for almost 36 hours. And if she had laid down, she would have suffocated. So something, someone, something somewhere in the universe or her own will kept her alive. And she was a few days from turning 3. So this awful story, but still turns out to be a story of survival, is the story of Carmina Salcido. And we have to go back a little bit, on April 12th of 1989, Carmina's father had received papers at work saying that he was going to be served for a second time with documents related to his second wife. He's married to his third wife, Angela, now, and they have 3 daughters together, including Carmina. So he's going to be served with papers from his second wife to obtain more child support. And he told his boss, he's a forklift driver at a winery in Sonoma. He's in wine country. And he told a supervisor of the occurrence. I guess they serve you at work because they know that's where you are and they can find you, and you can't run from a process server. So he's served on Tuesday, the 11th of April in 1989 at work. And he goes drinking, and he snorts cocaine. And he apparently was just making a plan to scorch the earth behind him and keep walking. He stole several cases of sparkling wine from the winery where he worked, the vineyard where he was a forklift driver, put them in the back of his car, went to a bar, met some other drinkers, took them out to the back of his car, opened his trunk and sold them, sparkling wine and champagne. Pocketed the money.
Okay.
Yeah. Had told some of the witnesses, yeah, I'm getting money together because I'm going to get out of town. He has had a lot to drink, and again had the cocaine that was given to him, shared with him by one of the bar patrons a few times apparently. And he goes home, picks up his daughters in the early morning, 3 daughters, takes them to a dump in Sonoma and slits their throats. So
At a dump.
At a dump. So Carmina's the middle child, and he cuts her, but apparently not as deeply as her older sister and her baby sister. And she remembers being in the car. A lot of doctors, psychologists think that, you don't remember anything before the age of 3. I remember things at the age of 3. And obviously this was something so big to Carmina. she remembered. She remembers that he got them out of bed in their pajamas, put the girls in the back. She remembers one time sticking her head over the back seat to the front and saying, "Papa, where are we going?" And she said he turned around and gave her a look that let her know he was mad, and that if she asked one more time, she would be in trouble. So her older sister, Sophia, was 5, and her father had cut her older sister so deeply that she was almost decapitated, and the wound went back to her spine. He had cut her baby sister, Teresa, in the same way, and both girls died from loss of blood from the lateral cuts across their throat that penetrated almost all the way back to their spine. Teresa had 2 cuts, Sophia had 3, and any one of those cuts would have been fatal, but he had to, make sure he enacted extra cuts. Carmina's cut was not as deep, but pretty bad, literally from ear to ear, and her head,
Oh my God.
her head flew forward, and he cut her so deeply it exposed her voice box, and it actually partially detached her tongue in the back. And if she had laid down, the tongue, not having any support, would have rolled back and choked her. But she didn't. She sat up. At some point, she must have gotten hungry or was delusional because she swallowed a few pebbles that were lying in the dump next to her.
Oh my God.
She was sitting in between her 2 dead sisters. And she was found 36 hours later by a transient picking through the dump, and he thought there were 3 dolls lying in a ditch. In the meantime, Sonoma police are looking for her father, and there's a $25,000 reward in a day, and they know he's a flight risk, and he was. He had fled on a bus to his mother's home in Mexico. And one review I read that was of the case was so fantastic. They described him as being found literally hiding under his mother's skirt.
Oh God.
Yeah. So before he splits town, he goes to his... He's going to kill his supervisor and his other boss, their boss.
Now, why is this?
I think because he said the police made him do it. He said the law, the state of California made him do it because they had come after him for more child support. So I think he felt like that his boss didn't stand up for him.
Oh, for God's sake.
When he got served. So his wife, Angela, they have these 3 children, but there's a lot of fighting between them. And when they had gotten married, she was already pregnant, but the oldest daughter, Sophia, turns out later biologically is not his. And he had somehow figured that out. And so he decided he was going to kill his wife. He said the entire time his plan was to kill his wife and himself. I'll explain later his validation for trying to killing his daughters. So he shows up at his in-laws' home. Now his father-in-law, Robert, his wife Angela's maiden name is Richards. So Robert Richards and Marion Richards live with Angela's 2 younger sisters, Ruth and Marie, and they're 8 and 12. And they live, like a mile or so from Ramon and Angela and the 3 girls. And they get along great. They had apparently, surface-wise, get along great. They had apparently spent the weekend before Easter together, and everything seemed fine. So it's now Thursday the 11th, and he goes at 7 a.m. to his in-laws' home, and he sees Robert Richards, who was a UPS driver. He sees him pulling out of the driveway at 7 a.m. So he knows He's gone. He breaks into his in-laws' house. He hits his mother-in-law in the head with a tire jack. Her 8-year-old daughter, Marie, is found lying in the hallway of their home with her nightgown pulled up to her waist, and her underpants are just wrapped around one ankle, and her legs are spread apart.
Oh, my God.
He had raped her.
Oh, my God.
The body of her 12-year-old sister is found face down in the living room with her underwear wrapped around one foot, her nightgown pulled above her waist, and her legs apart. And there's a bloody handprint found on Ruth's buttocks and handprints on her thighs. There's a knife found in the hallway near Marion, the mother's feet, and he had gone in and stolen his father-in-law's federal brand .22 caliber, or he'd stolen a Ruger and some .22 caliber bullets that he found in his in-laws' bedroom.
Man, he just went off the deep end completely.
Yes. After he steals the gun from his father-in-law and mother-in-law, he goes to his own home and he shoots his wife twice in the head. He shoots his wife, Angela, twice in the head. And the only reason we know the timeline is that because it's 1989, we can trace it through phone calls, regular phone calls, phone records. He had called his own home from his in-laws' home at 7:14. And then by 7:30, he is back at his home where he shoots his wife and picks up his 3 daughters and takes them to the dump, slits their throats, leaves them there, and says that he's going to kill himself. At least that's what he said after he was captured. I don't believe that was ever going to happen. He was way too much of a narcissist.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
They never do. It's just, that's what just is so infuriating.
So he goes to the winery where he works at 8 a.m. And because he knows his direct supervisor, Tracy Tuvey, had left his residence, and he knows he only lives 5 minutes away, and Tracy typically was at the winery an hour before everyone else. He pulls into the gravel driveway of the vineyard, and he is shot 3 times to his head and 1 shot to his arm from Ramon's car. Ramon shoots him from his car. An hour later, his supervisor, Kenneth, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Beauty, maybe? It's Butti. I'm going to say Beauty.
Beauty, yeah.
So his direct supervisor, Kenneth Beauty, pulls in, and Ramon flashes his lights at him. He's still in his car. And Beauty walks up to Ramon's car and says, "What's going on, Ramon?" And he notices that Ramon has blood on his forearms. He hears intermittent pops and clicks from the gun, which, by the way, the reason more people don't die in Ramon Salcido's horrible carnage is that the gun was really known to malfunction. Mr. Richards, the owner of the gun, the father of Angela and his wife and 2 daughters and 3 granddaughters who had attempted to be murdered, said that the gun had a hang. The bullets would sometimes hang up and keep it from functioning correctly. So Ramon's supervisor hears the clicks and the pops, and then he feels something hit his shoulder, and he falls to the ground. And he lays there and doesn't move. And his wife hears the noise and said she looked at Ramon and his eyes are open wide and his gaze is steady, but he had no expression. He backs out of the driveway and proceeds to figure out a way to leave town. He heads to a Wells Fargo in San Rafael, and he attempts to withdraw $140 around 9:25 from the joint account that he had with Angela. At 10 a.m., he's wearing a light-colored shirt and jacket and long white pants, but he purchases a new shirt and a pair of light-colored pants at a department store in San Rafael. At 12:18, he tries to cash some of the checks that were made out to him by the people he met at the bar the night before where he sold the stolen wine. And he goes to another Wells Fargo in San Francisco. He abandons his car in a parking lot across the street from the department store where he bought the new clothes that didn't have blood. And there's, he leaves the bag with the credit card receipt with his name, and there are 3 notes written in his abandoned car in Spanish. The first one, he says that he hopes that Arturo and Richard are arrested because they sold him cocaine.
Jesus.
And these are 2 men he met at the bar, and they actually said they shared their cocaine with him and didn't sell it. His second note says to his children, "Your father loves you very much and we'll see each other in God's other world." And the third one said, "Forgive me, God, but this state and these laws made me do it. My children and I could have had a better life, but I was pushed into doing this."
Great. Yeah.
So under the front seat is the .22 caliber semi-automatic gun with 1 round in the chamber, probably one that malfunctioned. There's a knife with a little bit of blood on it. There's children's clothing with blood on it. There's ammunition and a half-filled bottle of the sparkling wine that he had stolen from his employers. So 36 hours after the carnage begins on Saturday, April 15th of 1989, his daughters are found in the tall grass at the bottom of a 15-foot embankment in a field next to the Stage Gulch Quarry, which is also a dump site. It's 6 miles from his home, and 2 quarry employees observe the bodies of Sophia and Teresa, but they see Carmina sitting up and looking at her sisters. They notice her moving and say, "One's alive. One is alive." And they rush her to the hospital. And again, she has suffered such a deep cut across her throat. It starts at one ear, all along her jawbone, and goes to the other ear, exposing her voice box and partially detaching her tongue. And she apparently sat up for over 30 hours with her chest supporting her chin. And that is what saved her.
How old was she?
Days from turning 3.
That's incredible.
Days from turning 3 years old. And if she had laid down, the tongue, like I said, had no support in her mouth and it would have rolled back and suffocated her. She had wounds on her hands that were consistent with defensive behavior. She was dehydrated and shock. She was close to death. And when they, scooped her up and took her to the hospital, she was treated by 20 medical personnel. And when she's being transferred from one bed to a surgical bed, she says, "Daddy cut me.
Wow.
Daddy cut me."
Wow.
At one point later on, when she is healing, and it takes a village to heal this girl, she takes a coloring book and a red crayon and marks it over a puppy's paws and neck and says, "This is where Daddy cut me." She's showing the medical people, "This is where Daddy cut me." And she's
3 years old.
3 years old. So it takes many months and many surgeries, and one detective, Mike Brown, ends up being a second father to her, because I will tell you, it isn't all a really happy ending. She's still alive, and unfortunately so is Ramon Salcido, who's 58 years old and is in San Quentin. He refers to himself as the Reverend and immediately found Jesus.
I cannot do this. This is unbelievable. I can't believe it when these guys do this.
Well,
okay, I'm going to shut up.
Taking some deep breaths, she is this beautiful little girl and the only survivor in her family. And her grandfather, God bless him, Robert Richards, there's a picture of her standing next to her grandfather, and he's sitting on the hearth of a fireplace, and she's standing next to him at the age of 4 with a very large scar under her neck. And you can see in his face, he's defeated. He gives her up for adoption because he says he cannot process the grief. Now, he goes to see her once a year, where she has been adopted and is moved to Missouri, unfortunately adopted by, I'll just plainly call them crazy people, adopted by a family who changes her name to Cecilia because they say Carmina is a cursed name. They
Man.
Yeah, they are extraordinarily religious and strict. If at any point she mouths off, they pour Tabasco sauce on her tongue and make her swallow it and hold it, and they put a bar of soap in her mouth. She's so over this treatment that one day when she finds a box of newspaper clippings and she remembers what happened to her, they told her that that person no longer existed, that she was Cecilia, and that she came from a devil seed, and that she had demons running through her that needed to be exorcised.
I really want to puke right now.
I understand, because of all of the things that could happen. And she's still here. I'm telling you, she's still here. It has not been easy, and she has had many ups and downs, but she's still here. The pictures of her grandfather visiting her in Missouri are so heartbreaking, because he's an old man and she's a teenager, and they're standing next to a statue of the Virgin Mother. And she's trying to look happy, and he can't. He can't. And I understand. I don't know how I would survive if my wife, 3 daughters, 2 very young daughters, my married daughter, and 2 of my 3 granddaughters were murdered. I don't by one man in one day. I don't know how that would have, I can't imagine.
Yeah,
It's unimaginable.
Yeah, it is unimaginable.
I do feel really bad for Mr. Richards, but I feel really bad that he felt he couldn't raise her and gave her up for adoption. I got to say that's really hard. But I've gotten ahead of myself. Ramon leaves San Francisco on a bus, goes to his mother's home in Mexico, and there is an all-out search for him. And the federal marshals find him in his mother's small town, and from, the great review I read, the town of Los Molchis, Mexico, and he's hiding behind his mother's skirt. And they take him into custody. And this is something that's really interesting. I don't know what part of the brain triggers a family annihilator, but apparently whatever part that is, they want to talk. Like Chris Watts, just recently, Chris Watts in Denver wants to talk. So Ramon Salcido is like, yep, you're right. I did it. My plan was to kill myself. And it's not really my fault. It's all of your fault. You pushed me to do this. So he is brought back to the States. Carmina doesn't see him until she's older, and she meets him once in jail and realizes that didn't go the way she wanted it to go, and she doesn't want to see him again. And the only thing she'll say about her father is that I'm grateful that justice has been served and that he's on death row, and he probably will never see an execution chamber, but he'll be there forever as the Reverend Ramon, telling everyone all the good works of Jesus.
Yeah.
And that all you have to do is confess and you'll be forgiven. He signs everything, Reverend Ramon. He's a stellar human being, blaming everyone else for even his defense team tried to use the alcohol and cocaine, saying that he had a form of psychosis. Yeah, no, he'd planned it for days. It was, a day at least before he, and you take the time to slaughter people, drive different locations. No, it's not a psychotic depression.
Yeah, it was all planned.
Yeah.
It was all planned.
Totally. Yeah. So Carmina, or Cecilia at this time, is so unhappy. She leaves at the age of 17 and goes into a convent. And she's there for a year. And she wants to go by her name again. So she leaves the name Cecilia and takes her name Carmina back and leaves the convent and ends up at a kind of a ranch for wayward girls in Idaho. And she ends up finding a love of animals there. And I understand completely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ramon's trial was started in, like a year and a half after he slaughtered everyone. They moved it out of Sonoma County because of all of the news coverage. October 30th of 1990, he's finally found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and 2 counts of attempted murder. He's sentenced to death on November 16th of 1990. And his attorney, really still contends that he was under the influence of cocaine and alcohol. And, they're trying to get the verdict knocked down to second-degree murder or even manslaughter, saying that, he was under a psychotic break. No, not happening. So Carmina has something in her that draws her back to Sonoma. She visits her mother and sisters and grandmothers and aunts' graves quite often. And a picture of her as a very young girl is the cover of a book that she wrote called Not Lost Forever, My Story of Survival. And it was published in June of 2011. She had help, and another person helped her write it. And I have not read the book, but apparently it's well written, even though this other male author helped maybe steer her or guide her. It's in a lot of her words and her memories, and apparently a really great editor helped kind of get it together and make it flow easily, and it gets really good reviews. The picture is her standing next to her mother's grave in a little white dress, probably at the age of 4 or 5.
Oh, boy.
Now, even though she's had this wonderful detective who has checked on her and thinks of her as his daughter, and even after he retired, Mike Brown, even after he retired, he said, the one thing I wish I could do in my career is go back and kill Ramon Salcido. He says this. He says he just needs to be dead. And if I could change one thing about my career, I would go back and kill him.
Really?
Yeah, that's what a police officer says. So you know how affected he must be. He said he had never seen any sort of slaughter by one person like that in his entire career. So she publishes her book. She tries out for American Idol. She didn't get past the judges. She does have a beautiful voice, and God bless her for trying it. She's really beautiful, and she's 33 now. I guess Ramon, her father, is Hispanic, and I don't know what, nationality her mother is, but she was much lighter and has had light eyes, and Carmina looks very much like Angela, like her mother. She has beautiful light eyes and very pale skin, and she's beautiful, and she is, I'm not going to say she's broken, because while you can see sadness in those beautiful eyes, there's still a beautiful light. It might have dimmed. It might be smaller. The candle might have burned down some, but she's still in there. This beautiful girl is still in there. And as the years go by, it looks like, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, that things are getting a little easier, a little better. And if you look at a picture of her grandfather, he's broken. Robert Richards was broken that day. And yet she still has something in her. She's had numerous careers as a dog groomer, and I really believe that's one of the things that keeps her going. Any of her social media accounts, she has GoFundMe accounts that she shares for dog rescues. She has a daughter. She had gotten married, and she and the father are divorced, and she has unfortunately lost custody of her daughter to her husband. Her daughter is now 8. Her daughter's name is Zofia Angela Salcido. So she's Zofia. She calls her Zoe, sort of in a homage to her older sister Sophia, and her middle name is Angela, after her mother. So her daughter, who's 8 now, is in the custody of her ex-husband, Matthew, still in Sonoma. She has had, like I said, several careers, kind of trying to find herself. At one point, she was selling solar. She really fell on hard times and was living with a boyfriend in his car.
God, you just hate hearing this.
I do, but I'm telling you, the most recent pictures, you can see the light. You can see the light in her eyes, and she has become more beautiful. Sometimes there's a poem. I don't remember if the title is called Beautiful, but it's about an Indian brave who was very narcissistic and looked at himself in the reflection of the water quite often and was said how beautiful he was. And his father thought, he needs to learn a lesson, and he sends him out to battle, and he comes back with scars all over him, and he's obviously seen some shit. And his father says, now you're beautiful. And that's, this poem, if I can find it, is really her. She has become more beautiful, and I know she's having a really hard time. At some point, she was living in an apartment that was paid for by anonymous, benefactors who were trying to keep her going. She, in 2016, had an issue with a storage facility that had just a few things, and they had told her, we'll we'll keep these things. And they kept them like for 2 months, rent free. You know how storage facilities are, but like, you know, rent free. And then they said, look, we need to get paid at some point. So in 2016, her items were sold for $333. And it was five unopened boxes that were in this storage facility. And the man who bought it, his name is Juan Rodriguez. And I know he thought he was doing the right thing, but I don't know that she needed a lecture from him right now. In the boxes were things that other people would not have found important, but they were photographs of her family members who'd been killed. There was a cookbook that was like precious to her because it was used by both her mother and grandmother, a Bible, a diary, letters to her grandfather who, you know, lost, letters to and from her grandfather who had, you know, lost everything that day, and just a few other things of like sentimental value. So Juan Rodriguez told Carmina, I'll give you your things back, but I buy storage lockers and sell them, and I need my expenses reimbursed. So he said that the loss of profit would end up being about $500. So he added about, you know, $170 onto the $333. So he makes arrangements to meet with her, and he says, you know what? I have feelings too, but my background was really tough, and I chose a better path, and I'm trying to better myself, and I own this little business. You have options, and just because something bad happened doesn't mean you have to ruin your life. And I understand what Mr. Rodriguez is saying. I also think, you know, there's a time and a place for everything. And if he couldn't find it in his heart or his wallet to hand her items back that she lost, he could take the money that she got from benefactors to pay him and shut the fuck up. He doesn't need to tell her that she could take a different path. She's an adult, and she knows that she can take many different paths. And she's trying. That's all I can say. She's trying. And the most recent pictures I've found of her, she has really gotten so much more beautiful. She was a beautiful young girl, but she is a breathtakingly beautiful woman. And no matter what's happened to her, I hope that somewhere in her, she knows that she has made a difference, because her story won't be lost or forgotten. And people like Tipster Bridget will know to keep their chin on their chest and make it through. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you'd like to give us a call 832-TIPSTER, 832-847-7837. Send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And that Patreon page is patreon.com/justthetipsters.